Hello, and welcome to High Tech Leaders Can Transform Digital Content. Thanks for being here today. My name is Catherine Brinkman, and I'll be your moderator. I am the founder of EQ for AI and the host of the podcast Catbot AI. And today we are joined with various leaders, and we're going to be discussing digital content, which may not always get the spotlight that it deserves, but it is the backbone of innovation when we really think about it, especially in high tech. So as products evolve, content has to evolve faster, and many teams are finding it really hard to keep up. That's where our expert panel comes in. Today, we're joined by a stellar lineup of leaders. Stefan, if you would please introduce yourself.
Hi, Catherine, and hi everyone in the audience. My name is Stefan Jens, and I'm the principal worldwide evangelist for technical communication and knowledge management solutions at Adobe. With Adobe for almost 10 years now, and content management and component content management and AI and technical documentation and knowledge management, training content. So all that is part of my expertise.
Thank you. And let's go over to Bevan.
Very good. Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you today. Bevan Leader from Siemens. I oversee the digital support experience at Siemens, as well as a key focus on knowledge management and content. So I love content, so I'm grateful to be here. Been with Siemens for about 10 years, previously about 15 years with Microsoft, all in this space of support, knowledge management, content. So it's near and dear to my heart, and as we say, content is king. So I'm excited to share this time with you.
Great, thank you. And Dustin.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning. Dustin Collis, I'm with EPAM Systems, been there also about 10 years. It's like a decade crew here. And my current title is Head of Content Go-to-Market for their global content practices, and been doing that for about 20 years. So really looking forward to the session. Thank you, Catherine.
Yes, and to everyone, thanks for joining. You can see we have a wealth of knowledge on this call. We also are going to be taking some Q&A, and if you look at your screen, you'll see that there's a box. Feel free throughout our time together to go ahead and ask anything you may have. We're going to be monitoring that, and we'll be addressing questions at the end. And you also will get a recording that will be emailed. So before we really dive in, we will again leave some time for questions at the end. So we have 4 main topics that we're going to be covering today. The first is how to scale content at the speed of innovation. Like we said, it's happening so quickly right now. So how are we going to scale? Ways that we can create content once and then tailor it to multiple audiences. As well as our third topic, tips for actually maintaining global consistency without sacrificing local relevance. So how do we have that localization? And then our final topic will be around why CCMS, or Component Content Management Systems, can be a total game changer. So topic 1, let's take a look at scaling content at the speed of innovation. It's really the pressure cooker. There are new features and products that are rolling out daily. I know within AI, one of the things that I hear often is, how am I supposed to continue to keep up? So let's hear about how we can help content teams not get buried in rewrites and outdated documentation. So Bevan, I'm going to throw it to you first. Siemens is no stranger to product innovation. How are you all keeping up with your content ecosystem, keeping it agile enough to match that pace of change?
I love this question. You're right. At Siemens, we within Siemens DISW, which is our digital industry software. So we sit within the software component or business unit of Siemens. We have probably, I don't know, in the range of 350 different products that we offer to our customers. And so with that, we're innovating those often. Every quarter or so, those products are doing upgrades, new releases. And so we're constantly churning through products churning through content to try to stay on top of all of those changes. So this is extremely relevant to the world that we live in, and I'm sure many of you live in as well. So first and foremost, we utilize, as many of you I'm sure do as well, we use a CCMS, that allows us to stay on top of these changes. And with that CCMS, we're able to really keep our content componentized, if you will, atomic. It allows us to collaborate more effectively between all of the different personas that need to utilize the content. And then I think most importantly, we try to align closely with within this product lifecycle with our product management teams or our R&D teams. And so we'll have content owners, we'll have content writers that are in essence kind of embedded in with the product teams. So that, as they're going through the release cycle, as they're identifying new features, that they want to update, if they're, fixing bugs or issues within the product, that our content writers are, in essence, kind of embedded with those teams so that they're hearing firsthand all of those new features that are coming out in that release. And then they can be using the CCMS to be able to begin updating that content as their things are moving forward, instead of just trying to capture it at the end and missing technical aspects of that, or missing important updates to the different elements within those release notes or within those technical product documents. And then automating where possible. I hope that we can get into some details around AI and how AI can allow us to stay on top of this as well. So hopefully we can get into more details there.
You got it. Dustin, going to go to you next. What's actually worked at EPAM in regards of reducing that lag between the product rollouts and the content readiness?
Yeah, I think the two things we're seeing with our clients that's really helped to close that gap. First, and Bevan already mentioned it, is really making sure you're tying your documentation to your product delivery team. If those are separate, you're really sacrificing a lot of alignment, a lot of speed, just proper synergy, if you will, because your content teams are moving at a different pace than your product teams, and that doesn't really work out well. But to dive into what Bevan just added as a second topic, there is we're seeing a lot of agentic AI being used to bridge the gap between product changes, content updates, and kind of that reality of tone and managing the content for the different audiences. So now you can have AI say, hey, you've changed code, configuration, a user interface, and flag where that documentation needs to be updated, either manually, depending on your solution, or automagically if you have AI kind of doing that work for you. Not perfect yet, but it can definitely dramatically reduce that chasing cycle where you're trying to find what's been changed and track it down with a manual checklist. So that's the biggest change that we're seeing right now in the market.
And Stefan, one of the things that Dustin commented on was just having multiple audiences. So from your global vantage point at Adobe, what are some pitfalls that you're seeing organizations fall into when they're trying to move faster with content?
I think that's it falls into the same bucket, like what Bevan said with the product ecosystem they have. Like I think he said 350 products. So that's a huge amount of products, and probably each of these products have a lot of components that might need to have their separate documentation plus supplier documentation and so on. So right. There's a huge amount of content, right? And I think it was you, Bevan, initially you said content is king.
Yes.
And I would like to add context is kingdom. And
even better.
Context is, of course, about personalization, and also in the context of AI. An AI agent can give better answers if it has the right context. Same with machine translation. And so context is always important there. And context and product variants are, for me, they are falling into the same bucket, technology-wise, because it's about tagging content and marking up content for a specific audience, or for a product variant, or for delivery channel, or for a specific audience, whatever. You need to somehow mark up that content and tag it, and maybe with metadata, maybe with attribution, and so on. So there are a lot of technologies available how you can mark up that content and push out from one documentation set multiple variants for multiple product variations, or for different audiences or different platforms like mobile and web browser and so on, or desktop, and or maybe head-up display in a car, whatever the delivery channel might be today. It's I think the majority of companies I'm talking to are just starting that journey of content personalization and tagging content for all these different outputs. And most of them are struggling with that, because the technology you need to have for that, and there we will probably talk about XML and AI and so on later, but the technology you need to have for that is obviously a component content management system and XML, because this both gives you the technologies at hand to make that dream come true. And you cannot achieve that with Microsoft Word documents or so. So, and a lot of companies still are working with unstructured content, maybe in a design document, maybe a Word document or a classic FrameMaker document, whatever. And this journey for many companies has just started. And Bevan is obviously far ahead of the market, I would say, with already having a CCMS. But many companies are not there yet, and they are struggling to keep up with the demands of the market today.
Bevan, before we go to the next topic, is there anything you'd add based on what you've heard from our other two panelists?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, to kind of add on to what Stefan was mentioning is, when we think about the breadth of our content, and for any particular release, next release that's coming up, I think we need to really prioritize pretty ruthlessly the content, or the aspects, the different elements in the content that need to be updated. There's certain content tiers, if you will, that are more important than others that need to be updated when we think about, if it's onboarding, or it's SEO, or it's customer support type details. Yeah. Those are likely the most important areas that need to stay updated, and then any technical aspects of the product, of course, but we have to be careful not to feel like we've got to update every single aspect of the content every single time, because then you're never going to keep up with it. So prioritize, and ensure you're focused on the most important aspects of your content.
Thank you. And Stefan, you mentioned that context is kingdom. Hyper-personalization is so key. So that brings us to our next topic. Creating once and then publishing for many. So let's talk about that multi-audience content. Developers, support teams, sales, I'm in sales, so sales reps, end users, we all need slightly different content, but it's still versions of the same content. So most teams don't actually have the bandwidth to write from scratch. It would take forever. So Dustin, I'm going to throw it to you first. How are you enabling your clients to create one time, publish everywhere, without sacrificing the relevance or the clarity?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest problem we see in the world of content today. Content is king. It's always the long pole in the tent for any digital transformation project, any kind of documentation project. And the reality is we have too many audiences these days. There's so many people who need to read and ingest this content at different levels. There's just not enough time to write it all, right? Like there's just not enough time in the world. So what we've tried to do is help shift our clients from a channel specific mindset to a more modular, structured content model perspective. I think Bevan and Stefan already kind of touched on that. But instead of the old world, or where many people are today, if they don't have a CCMS, is instead of manually cloning and adapting content for each different audience, we try to move them to more of a build that content reusable components, usually in Markdown, and tag each component by intended audience or role. And what that allows is that delivery time, the publishing system, depending on your ecosystem, can assemble the right pieces for each audience for those different channels based on those tags. And just as importantly there, when you created this structure, all of a sudden it improves search as well. So it allows users to find content that's really relevant to them based on that tag. So content is king, context is kingdom, but metadata is really the building block of kind of these broken down component like content pieces. So that's what we're seeing.
Okay, so Bevin, I'm going to throw it to you because you've been shaking your head and you said well said. So how do you actually balance that technical accuracy with having that accessibility with different personas when you're using the same source material?
Yeah, I love it. I like to use kind of the metaphor or the visual of, if you think about it, like this being a flexible knowledge Lego set, if you will. And when there's the same blocks, right? The same Legos can be used to create and build multiple things, if you will. It's the same with our content, right? As Dustin mentioned, we can have multiple Legos, or we can have multiple modules that can be utilized to assemble, a single doc or a single piece of content based upon the persona. So if you think about that persona being, you're a technical writer, for example. I know we have, a number of folks here that are technical writers. You could be a support engineer, so technical writer doing a technical product doc. You could be a knowledge analyst or a knowledge writer for support. Or you could be, somebody in social media, depending upon, wherever that audience is and who you're writing that for. You can take those Legos and you can build your content based upon those components and those modular areas. But the important thing is it has to be coming from a single source, right? So you've got a single source that you're pulling from to build, the content, to take those Lego pieces, those components, and build your content from there. So what that does is it ensures technical accuracy, plus it ensures that you're not duplicating a bunch of content for, just because you're writing for different personas doesn't mean you can't leverage, key aspects of that at the same time.
And Stefan, I'm going to go to you, because with the large global organizations, it would be interesting to know how they are structuring content and CCMS tools are streamlining their processes.
Yeah. So, when we talk about multiple audiences and personalization, mostly the discussion is just from a marketing perspective coming about human consumers of content. But today, Bevin might be in that field also with Industry 4.0 and things like that, and machines talking to each other, big machine parks talking to each other and stuff like that. Audience today is not just human content consumers. It's also AI engines, it's machines. And I always bring up that nice example from one German manufacturer where the maintenance cycle of a machine is pulled from the technical documentation through the air. So content is, we need to think about content in more modern ways than just producing content for human readers. We also need to produce content for machines and for machine learning systems and all that. So with that, I really like the Lego visual that you brought up, Bevin. And components and componentization of content, that's key. You need to break down the content into small pieces, into modular content that you can reassemble and reuse in multiple contexts, and have these self-containing information units that you can repurpose in multiple scenarios. and have them in a format neutral or in a neutral format. Markdown is, of course, one classic example for that. XML is another example for that, which offers additional possibilities on top of Markdown, where you can mark down to the individual word or phrase for different audiences or platform or whatever it might be as a delivery channel. I see multiple aspects there. One is you need to have a CSMS. The second is you need to have a proper data format, maybe Markdown, maybe XML, depending on how deeply you want to go with personalization and omnichannel delivery. And with a CSMS, you need to have all these capabilities, like enabling. It should be cloud-based, of course, today. It should run in the cloud. It should be browser-based. And of course, people should be able to collaborate with each other properly in a collaborative way. The authors, the reviewers, the subject matter experts, databases need to be connected to all that technology that is available today. And then you have a good chance to deliver your content to all channels and have true omni-channel publishing then. And omni-channel includes human beings and machines.
So here's my question. I have two. The next question is, how can metadata help with omnichannel? Open to anybody.
Okay. Should I go first? Or,
Go ahead, Stefan. I'm throwing it to you. You mentioned it. Go ahead.
I think of metadata in two ways. One is the metadata on the asset itself that you're managing, and one is the content fragment that you have. And a content fragment in that meaning, not in an AM meaning content fragments, but a fragment for me is really a very small, tiny information unit. That can be a single bullet point, that can be a value in a table, that can be a warning note or whatever. These small, now I lost a little bit track. And then these information units can have, you can attribute these information units by wrapping them into a tag and having an attribute on that element and say this specific value is for this product configuration and this specific value is for that product configuration. And when publishing, you can create multiple outputs of that and have two different manuals, for example, produced, one for this specific configuration, one for the other. So this is the metadata or attribution, as I call it, on the individual content itself, and then you have the metadata on the asset management level, where you take larger information units, like a full topic or so, with specific metadata. This topic belongs to this product configuration or this product unit or so. And then you can use this information to publish content outside of.
Thank you. Thanks. Bevan, would you add anything? Dustin, anything you'd add to that?
I would actually pull back a little. I think a lot of times we dig into like the problem, like, okay, how are we going to structure this content, whether it's Legos or other. And what we try to do is, at the beginning of this, is identify the content threads, who's going to be using it, why they're going to use it. And so imagine a content strategy at the beginning of a cycle rather than digging right into the metadata that you think somebody might use. So really identifying who's going to use this content, how it's going to be used over time, and how it'll evolve at the beginning of the cycle rather than somewhere in the middle where you're defining meta tags. I think that's really helpful, kind of like shifting QA left, but also shifting content strategy left. And making sure that the content is really prioritized, as Bevan said earlier, for the right audiences, and that you're really focusing on who needs to have that content and who needs to update it or have that updated content. So I think going back to the bigger question is, how are we enabling these teams? Well, a lot of times it's really identifying that particular audience and what they're trying to accomplish. And then the taxonomies and the metadata and things like that flow naturally from those decisions of your prioritized audiences. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what Stefan said. Context is
Mhm.
kingdom.
Mhm.
So understanding the why. Devin, what would you add? Anything?
No, I think well said. Well said again. I think if you can get down to that level of detail with that metadata, with the tagging, and I know it's tough, if you, especially if you don't have that CCMS, and like Stefan said, many are just at the start of their journey. So, kind of getting down to that level of detail and being able to work in that metadata level and the tagging and the personas and all of that,
Yeah.
it's a journey. You'll get there, but just know that that should be a North Star of where you want to get to, is to that level of detail. So just know that's part of the journey and where you want to get to, and just work towards that.
We're going to keep it brief on this, gentlemen. Thinking about it's 2025, we're not just connecting with humans anymore. Now we're connecting with machines. What advice, if we're just starting out, what advice would you have when it comes, I'm going to go to you, Dustin, first, when we're creating our strategy to handle machines?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, I kind of have to treat it just like another channel, and condense that information in a way that's machine readable. And it's very different than what we consume. So you can take all of that content, you can turn into a vectored database that's really tailored for AI, specific AIs. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But it just depends on the AI you're trying to have consume your content and what you're trying to get the end user to then do with it. So vectorized databases of content, really clear, demarcated. If you don't have that level of detail, really clear, demarcated, structured content like we've been talking about is key. Those are the two big things that I would immediately focus on.
Stefan, I'm going to go to you, and then Bevan will hear from you.
Sorry, my dog was disturbing me. What was the question?
Thinking about if you're just starting out your CCMS strategy, what advice would you have for somebody to work with the machines?
Starting how to start with the CCMS, or how to deliver to
Or
machines?
just your content journey. I mean, a lot of people nowadays, it's new, right? You're used to speaking or focusing just on humans. What advice would you have if we now have to integrate focusing on machines, technology?
Basically similar to what I already said earlier. You need to have the right technology in place, and you need to have a system that has APIs, for example,
Okay.
that can deliver in multiple formats. May it be JSON, may it be XML, maybe it be Markdown, may it be some specific machine readable format. Whatever the required content consumption format might be from the channel you're delivering to, you need to have a system that enables that. The technology is there, you can use it, and the systems are there, AM guides, for example, but you need to have such a system. If you stick with Microsoft Word or unstructured content, you will never be able to deliver content to multiple audiences or multiple channels or platforms and so on. So you need to have a CCMS. Starting the CCMS journey is, for me, look at what do you want to achieve. Not so much where are you now, but what is your vision? Where do you want to go with your content? How do you want to use it? Where do you want to deliver it? And then drill it down to the specific requirements that you might have, and then see which systems fits best for your needs. Depends on team size, of course, and all kinds of requirements there. But generally said, look for a cloud-based solution, look for a solution that is AI enabled, and look for true omni-channel publishing, translation management, look for for online review and collaborative review processes, and look for database connectors. I saw a question from Michael in the chat about one blocker for them is copy and pasting content from Jira tickets. Yeah, so that's a pain. I can imagine that. And look for a system that, for example, in our system, we have a database connector where you can connect with Jira. And for example, in the software release, you can pull in all the tickets that are marked for specific release, import that into the system. And then the technical writer can just go over that content, maybe fix some typos that were in the Jira tickets, maybe rephrase the content a little bit, and then publish it. And push it into translation management automatically, and publish it to the website, publish it to a release notes PDF, whatever. So this full content automation, that is something you should look for, in my opinion, when you look for a CCMS, because you might have a good CCMS that you see somewhere in the market, but it can't connect to databases, or it can just connect to 2 or 3 databases, or can only connect to Jira, but not to Atlassian, or whatever. And then you're struggling there. Look for something that has an open abstract framework, where you have a layer where you can separate between different external systems for content migration into your system, and then have the layers in the publishing engines to output it to multiple formats.
And then Bevan, how would you get us to that North Star?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, and probably not enough time here with this one to be able to speak to that. But again, at the highest level, I think Stefan, kind of outlined, that journey quite well. Start with a good process. You've got to have a good process, a good workflow, and then you can then take and figure out which CCMS, which translation service, what technology can help you get there based upon your needs. Start with the process, start with your requirements, and then go to the technical. Over the years, too often we found that they've taken the technical and then tried to build the process to the technical, and it doesn't always work, right? You need to be clear on what your process is, what your requirements are, and then as you do that, then you can go to the technical side and say, does this meet our needs? And, okay, great, it does. We'll use it, and then it'll help you drive that process.
Maybe if I quickly jump in there.
Quickly.
Very quickly, okay, very briefly. Don't always look only at the current processes, because very often I see in companies that they have huge, complex processes that might not really make sense in today's world. So sometimes it's also good to look at the process at the beginning and say, okay, do we really need this process? Do we really need that? And can we change it? And is there technology available that makes it more easy so that we don't need this process, or can shorten the process and so on?
Yeah.
So that takes us right into the next topic of global consistency. How are we supposed to do that, especially when we're focusing on making sure that we're not losing the brand, literally the brand, the voice, the accuracy of the information that we're putting out? So Stefan, I'm going to go to you, because Adobe does support those global customers at scale. How do you actually preserve the content integrity across the different languages, the platforms, the regions?
It's a very complex question, and I
know,
don't want
I
to
know.
talk too much, because I've already talked a lot in this conversation.
Pick one, maybe between languages, platforms, and regions. Which would you think is the most important for all of us to know about?
As an old translation person with a translation industry background, of course, translation is for me a key factor here, because talk to my heart in my language and I will buy. Having a system that has full translation management, that keeps track of changes in the content and marks them up for localization, and having proper data connectors to all the translation management and translation memory systems, like Across and SDL and all these bigger vendors. You should have a system that comes with all these connectors, and then you are pretty much ready for a good localization workflow. Translation quality and so on is a different discussion. Let's not go into that, but in machine translation, not even. But
very different.
the content integrity can be solved by the CCMS by making sure to track what has changed. Does it need retranslation? Is it new content that needs full translation and so on? And then you can deliver it to all these languages in all these platforms.
Great. Dustin, going to you. How do you manage stakeholder reviews and then the feedback loops when the content is being used across those different countries and teams?
Yeah, that's really difficult, to be honest. What we've seen, I was just at Adobe Summit and I had a conversation on this, and the person talked about having 6 different systems that they had to manually move things between. They tried to integrate them, it didn't work. So really, the challenge depends on a person or a company's setup. So what is your architecture there? Do you just have Jira and you're copy pasting into Asana? Like craziness, right? You can just be kind of doing whatever you have. But reviews and feedback loops, that all falls apart when you have these disparate solutions. Disconnected content hubs, and of course, we talk about different countries and teams, so you have different workflows probably in access and groups across those regions. So what we do with our clients is we try to identify the business process. And to Seven's point, not necessarily your old business process, but the business process that you want,
Exactly.
and create that process. Make sure it understands the process of creating the content, governing the content, and then we work to build that into a connected set of tools and workflows, rather than, hey, we have this beautiful process, and now we have to figure out how to cobble it together in your disconnected tools. So obviously, trying to unify everything into one platform is ideal, but not realistic in this day and age. So at least in an integrated ecosystem, that's probably the bigger challenge. But I think once you have that kind of understanding of the flow and then the tool sets that are connected, all of a sudden review cycles, localization, and governance all become much easier as part of what you just baked, right, in that oven. So that's how we kind of start. But there's a lot more to it, of course.
So then, Bevan, what's one localization pain point that your team's overcome, and then how did they do that?
So with our products, many of our products are quite technical in nature. So when we create the content, there's a lot of wording, phrases, other things in the content that is technical, and that our translation services don't always do a very good job of being able to take this technical context and translate that into Japanese, for example, so that it makes sense to our Japanese audience, or that it makes sense to our Korean audience or our Chinese audience. And so, we've really kind of struggled with that, because we want to just use the translation service and have it translated all, and then we publish that. But what we found is, we get Japanese customers that come back and say, this doesn't make sense to us in the way that you think it does to you and the translation service. So we've really had to kind of step back and recognize, hey, these are the technical elements of our document that don't translate well. Let's either tell our translation service not to translate that context, or give it what it should be, so that when it does come to that, and using AI is a great way to do this as well, when it does come to that, it knows how to properly translate that in that local language, as needed. So that's been a key pain point of ours. We've been trying to massage it the best that we can, and utilize our translation service, but we also spend time with our local audience, with our local team, and have them, help us with that. And that's going to be key, is really getting that feedback loop, so that they can come back, and then we can fine tune our AI, we can fine tune our translation service to meet their needs.
Yeah, and let's just be honest, content chaos is real. So having that CCMS is really important, and it's a game changer. It's a very powerful solution. So obviously everyone would use it, but adoption is not always easy. So I'm going to throw it to you again, Bevan. How has the CCMS actually helped your team manage that complexity, improve reuse, and then also scale content with limited resources?
Yeah, again, I think that this is a good question, because I think it just kind of summarizes, everything that we've talked about already when it relates to a CCMS. So creating a library of smart, modularized content. I mean, that's been a game changer, obviously. Using templates, for consistency, between our writers, between our languages and things like that. And then, tracking usage and optimizing those high impact components. That allows us to see, are we using those components effectively? Which ones are outdated, that we aren't using very often and need to be, cycled out potentially, or things that are duplicates. We want to streamline that as much as possible so that we don't have a bunch of duplication within those components or those modules. So that, I think the modularization, I think they, referring to it as atomic, that's been the biggest game changer for us in using a CCMS. And honestly, I can't even remember how we did it before we had, the CCMS to give us the components, and so we're not feeling like we're writing a whole document or a piece of content over and over again. So I'll just leave it at that. That's been a huge game changer.
So when we're taking a look, Dustin, at actually evaluating some of these CCMSs, what should we be looking for if we're going to be using it as an enterprise-wide usage?
Yeah, this is near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of this kind of evaluation work. It's fun. But where we start first is we pull up again and we start looking at the business model, what you're trying to accomplish at that level, because not every organization has different groups. They don't always have developers, end users, support teams, partners. They don't have them all in there. But if you do, you need to know that you have to have a solution that can deliver to multiple audiences, different multiple internal groups contributing to the content. So technical writers, engineers, marketing. And then, of course, we've talked about this in the whole session, but are you publishing across multiple channels and formats? Probably yes, right? And so for me, once you understand the complexity at that level, then you focus on how the CMS handles that kind of capability, handles the management of that, the grouping, the component level capabilities, multiple source contributions. So we talked about collaboration. Does the CCMS allow collaboration, or is it a one-shot kind of workflow? A lot of what I consider to be open source tools are very developer centric. So your marketer isn't really going to know how to work in Markdown necessarily. So you have to make sure the editing interfaces work for you, make sure that the versioning's there, localization. And of course, we've talked about AI a lot. Automation and AI integration in their roadmap on that product is super critical as well. So probably my statement there is it's really critical to look beyond a feature list and how well the platform can integrate with your business model that you're trying to accomplish, not necessarily the vice versa. So that's where I would start.
Got it. Stefan, over to you. Where do you actually see the CCMS landscape evolving next, especially with AI?
I think AI integration into CCMS is becoming very important for the vendors and the customers. And it starts from integrating AI with content management itself, managing assets, and it goes to content authoring, supporting the author, creating short descriptions for a data topic, summarizing content, turning raw content, copy and pasting raw content into into a topic and have the AI engine rephrase it properly, or creating a blurry written paragraph into a proper step list with a step-by-step instruction, things like that. Supporting the author, or for example, as we are talking about content reuse and componentization, supporting the authors, like similar to what Bevan said about content application and making sure that there's no content application, having the AI agent running in the background, scanning the content that the author is writing, and then suggesting, hey, there is already very similar content in our system. Maybe you want to reuse that component instead of rewriting it. Or use it as a boilerplate template, maybe only, and just change something, or just reference that component in your current topic. So these kind of intelligent, authoring support by AI, this is becoming very important. Content delivery, AI support there on the published website and so on is a different thing. Let's not talk about that here today, but that's of course an important topic as well.
Yeah. And there's a question in the chat that I'll actually, Ritesh asked something around how you can actually envision the role of Gen AI in content creation. So Dustin, I'm going to go to you first and then Bevan.
I mean, how do I envision it? We see it used every day now. Different tools have integrated it well through direct, like agentic orchestration, or just hitting the models themselves. But as long as you have a walled garden, so that you can just the right way, secure and private. If it can learn your brand and your tone, it can really help in the creation of these fragments, but it can really help identify where you strayed from that, or where you're maybe missing something. If you imagine a checklist of when you're doing documentation, like, have you missed any of those key areas, and are you hitting the right highlights for the audience that you're writing for? That's how I see it, and how we've seen Gen AI come in and really kind of change the landscape for those that are able to adopt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll add to that as well. When I think about whether it's a technical doc, or whether it's a knowledge article, for example, we're finding the ability to just simply take fairly unstructured type content, whether that's in Jira, whether that's in a support case, wherever that unstructured content is. We may have a back and forth stream of Jira comments, or support case. AI does really a fantastic job of taking that very unstructured conversation and pulling that in and creating a first draft of a document, or a first draft of a knowledge-based article, so that the writer is not starting from scratch. They're able to have a draft, then they're able to take that and really just fine-tune it. And then I think, Stefan, you mentioned as well that it does a great job of using the right voice, if you will, so that we can be pretty consistent about, it creates the draft, and then we can take it and say, create it in this voice, and then it does that. And then it's just the fine tuning of it, and we become much, much more efficient. And, back to the first question of how do we stay in front of, the frequent, life cycle releases that we have. This is another way, that our teams are able to stay more efficient. If you can really take AI and utilize it to create that first draft, and then all you're doing is fine tuning it and really making sure the technical aspects of that document or that article are proper, are correct, are right. So it continues to be a game changer for us.
Thank you.
There's another interesting.
Go ahead.
There's another interesting application that I recently saw with a customer. They deal a lot with compliance. So that their documentation need to be compliant to certain regulations from the EU or from the US. And they are using AI now to check the content that the authors have written. The AI engine knows the regulation, like European Machinery Directive, stuff like that. And it can check if the written content from the author is compliant with the European Machinery Directive. So these kinds of support for authors is coming with AI as well, I think. And it will add huge benefits, and already adding it.
Great, thank you. We do have a poll. If you would just take a moment, do you currently use a CCMS in your organization? We're just curious. Yes, no, or maybe you don't even know. And we'll take about 10 seconds to quickly fill that out for us. I was joking, countdown like it's NASA. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then if we could close that poll. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes for some Q&A. We'll see the results of the poll in a moment. There was a question in the Q&A. Let me go back to this from Michael, and I'm going to throw it over to Bevan first, and then we'll hear from you, Stefan. And the question is around how much time does a typical review cycle take?
Hard to answer.
Yeah, Stefan, if you want to kind of run first, and I'll jump in.
I would say it's almost impossible to answer because it really depends on the volume of the review. It's a very generic discussion. Of course, there are certain things that can slow down your review process, which are more process-wise. Let's say you're sending around a PDF to 5 subject matter experts, and they all review that content, and the legal department reviews it, and so on. And then it goes back to one author, and the one author has to implement the change requests from multiple sources. This is an old process. If the reviewers are collaborating on the same document in real time, and the author can monitor the incoming changes and have a discussion in the chat with the reviewers, stuff like that, a modern review experience, collaborative and interactive and in real time, this can improve the review process. So I would not really want to answer that question. How long does it take to review a certain content? But what is wrong with your current review process, and how can it be better? That's the question you should ask, not how much time it takes, because then it's just too broad. There might be multiple reviewers involved, and it's, if you have 5 pages or 100 pages or 1,000 pages to review, it's a huge difference for the time you need for that review. And maybe you have translations that need review as well, and so on. So it's really difficult to answer.
Bevan, would you add anything? Dustin? Anything?
No, okay. Not much to add to that. I think Stefan hit it on the nail on the head there. It's perfect.
So I'm taking a look at those poll results so we don't forget about that. There are 4 people joining us today that already use one, and there's 11 that don't. So it looks like we influenced 11 people to start looking into that. We'll take some time. Again, there's a Q&A box that you can use, type in your questions. While we're doing that, there is one question that I have, and that really is around what are the biggest aha moments or the wins after people are implementing a CCMS? And throw it to anybody. Anybody go first.
Well, I think what I've seen, and I've already brought this up, but search is so critical, and being able to find content. So internal, developers and product managers, they kind of know where to look. But as a partner to many large tech organizations like Adobe, going into their experience league or their documentation area, if it's structured well, if it's really created for me, being able to search it's much easier than not, right? And we see adoption just skyrocket when it's able to be found and it's written for me. So I think, that's what we preach to our customers and our clients. And that's where I've seen the biggest value is just adoption and findability.
I found that very interesting that you mentioned that, Dustin, because in my presentation, I think it was last week in the CCMS webinar, I said, one big advantage is finding content. And I'm not talking about finding documents, I'm talking about finding content, which is a different thing than finding documents. Yep. Searching for a file name or so is easy, but searching for content within documents or within topics or whatever components is a different thing. And this is definitely one big advantage of CSMS I see as well, Dustin. Definitely. And I hear that from customers also. Searching through the content repository becoming easy.
Bevan, what would you add?
Yeah, I think, again, search, absolutely critical. AI search being, top of the list these days. We found as we've introduced AI search, to leverage our content is that it exposes, they talk about hallucination and they talk about, all of this. But what we found is that it really exposes, the kinks in the armor, of our content, if you will, because we don't. Your AI is only going to be, or your search is only as effective as the content that it's pulling from, and so that's really been kind of where we're like, okay, we have to do better. With our content, we have to do better in making it higher quality, more efficient. So that's been a big aha moment for us is like, we're being exposed and we want to make sure we're doing it right from a content perspective.
And then we did get another question in from Di. What are the biggest challenges when migrating to a CCMS? So Dustin, you have a huge smile on your face. Go ahead.
That's I mean, it depends where you're coming from, right? But if you're coming from unstructured content, just understanding how to break that apart, and what that migration might look like. I said it earlier, I'll say it again, and I'll steal it from Bevan, content is king. And being able to understand your content and then parse it out into these different structures within a CCMS, and then those workflows that go along with it, that's the hardest part. The integrations and the technical work, that can be managed, but it's change management, it's enablement, and content strategy are probably the big blockers or the challenge areas when doing a project like this.
Bevan, go ahead, and then we'll hear from Stefan.
Yep. Yeah. It's been a little while since we went through that, but I would agree. I think those three pillars are the most difficult piece of it. Is you don't want to necessarily put the CCMS in place before you have those elements that Dustin talked about figured out. Because if you do, you're going to spend a lot of time kind of restructuring it within the CCMS itself, and so that's, you really do want to make sure you have that foundation set with what is the content strategy, what's the voice, what are those components that are going to be most critical, so that when you do move into that CCMS, that's all very structured and very clean, and then it makes life so much easier, makes it much more efficient. So yeah.
Great.
Definitely. Yeah, I also like that Dustin brought up change management.
Yes.
So that's of course, if you're not working with the CCMS yet and have all these classic processes and classic way of working, it's a little bit of a culture change also, and it's you need to rethink how you work and how you use content, how you recompile content, how you author content, how you publish content, how you translate content, and so on. There are a lot of possibilities that come with the CCMS that can make your life much more easy and make you become more productive and have a faster time to market or shorter time to market for your content. But it's a little bit of a culture change, and sometimes you have change resistance there. You have change resistance in the team, maybe in the technical writing team. You might have managers who don't see the value in a CCMS for technical content, and you need to convince them and make sure you have a proper business case set up for that, and have maybe supporting material. I saw in the docs pod there are also some documents there, like the IDC studies, who prove how much money companies and organizations can actually save with the CCMS. And that can help to convince management, upper management, for that business case for CCMS. But usually I don't see a lot of technical issues there. Content migration is possible today. There are companies who can do that, and the system like AM Guides usually comes also with some pre-built content migration, like from Word to XML and so on. So technical wise, I don't see integrating or moving to a CCMS as a big challenge, but it's more a philosophical thing, so to say, if you are able to do that and willing to do that and feel if the pain is big enough.
Yeah, I think it's worth it at the end of the day. Like the value is large, right? It's there in your face. It's just a matter of getting there.
Yeah,
It's not easy, right? Sometimes it's a heavy lift.
Sometimes.
So that wraps up our executive roundtable today. Appreciation for Dustin, Evan, and Stefan.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your insightful perspectives. There's a lot of years of experience on this call. So if you are serious about scaling your content with precision, agility, and also global cohesion, the conversation is just beginning. There is a recording of this. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and have a great Friday tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you.
Dustin, Catherine, thank you.